Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Mr. Camwell. I'm the Director of Science. This is B5. This is a series of lessons on B5. So GCSE, Homeostasis and Response, Paper 2 content. And if you are a combined student, this is the second lesson in that set of series. If you're a triple student, it's lesson 4. So this is B5, lesson 4 for you. Again, like I said, if you joined me for lesson 1 on combined, this is the new lesson. Triple, you would have done the eye and the brain beforehand. So now you've come to this lesson as well. So title is Homeostasis in your books. If you can jot that down for me, and then we shall begin. So just to get us started, what I want us to think about are a couple of things when we think about homeostasis, and you can kind of guess where I'm going with this. Don't worry if you've not heard of the word before, because we're going to explain exactly what that is, because that's one of the definitions that we do need to know. So what I want you to think about is what happens. So what happens if you drink a lot of water on a cold day? So tell me what happens. And these are all questions in regards to what happens. I'll give you a bit of time to complete them. So I'll go through them. What do you think will happen if you drink a lot on a cold day? What would happen if you work hard and sweat a lot on a warm day, but you have not had a drink yet? What would happen if you eat more salt than your body needs? What would happen if you are too hot and your body temperature starts to rise? What would happen if you go out for a walk in the snow wearing shorts and a t-shirt? And what would happen if you eat a bag of sweets? So you've got 6 what would happen. I'll give you 2 minutes to think about that. Timer on. Have a look, see what you think. Jot down some answers and we'll go through them in 2 minutes. Just a minute remaining. Okay, so again, I'm not looking for the exact science behind these. As long as you're able to describe kind of what happens, that's fine for the moment. So what would happen if you drink a lot of water on a cold day? Well, if it's cold, you're not going to sweat a lot. Okay, if you drink a lot on a cold day, you're therefore going to retain a lot of water. If you retain a lot of water, it means the only way it can come out is you are going to urinate a lot. So that would be your answer, kind of that. You would wee a lot if you wanted a more common phrase. If you worked hard and sweated a lot on a warm day, but you have not had a drink yet, the likelihood is you'd be exceptionally dehydrated. You might even feel slightly have a headache, The reason being is because you've lost a lot of water and you've not replaced the water or the minerals that have been lost through sweat. So that's what would happen. Your urine, for example, would be quite of a yellow colour as well. What would happen if you eat more salt than your body needs? Well, if you do eat salt, you tend to get thirsty. That's what salt leads to, or too much salt, I should say. The body does need some salt, but not as much as, say, a bag of chips could have. That would be far too much generally. So you would get thirsty. If you are too hot and your body temperature starts to rise, well, if you're hot and your body temperature starts to rise, what would happen? You'd probably sweat more and look a bit flush. So you would lose water that way. Okay, so you'd end up being sweaty. You go out for a walk in the snow wearing shorts and t-shirt, I wouldn't recommend it. You would feel very cold and you'd shiver. That's what would happen. And if you eat a bag of sweets, well, apart from the most common phrase is that you'd end up being hyper, that's not necessarily the case. What will happen is if you eat a bag of sweets, you would take on a lot of energy. You probably would get a bit of a sugar rush, but it doesn't equate to being hyper. So, you know, that's more of a psychological state than it is anything else. So if you eat a bag of sweets, your body can cope. It just depends on how quick it can cope. And what you'll find is you'll get an extra boost of glucose. So that was there were some starter things to think about. But homeostasis includes all of those. So what are we learning today? Our challenge, explain what homeostasis is and why it is important. So that's our challenge. What is homeostasis? So define it. Our aspire, compare the actions of the nervous system and the endocrine systems. I will explain what the endocrine systems is later. However, for the moment, let's just take it for the nerve system and the endocrine system. So what is homeostasis? And compare the actions of the nervous and endocrine systems. Just to start us off, I've got an interesting starter, an interesting short clip that should describe a bit of homeostasis. So see what you think, and we'll come back. It should only be a minute long.
Okay, what did Amy tell you?
Oh, very well. I can't keep up this clever charade any longer. She told me that you were thinking of ending it with Leonard.
Okay, you listen to me. I think it's really sweet you're trying to protect your friend, but this is none of your business, got it?
Excuse me, this is not about protecting my friend. I'm a big fan of homeostasis. Do you know what that is?
Of course not.
Yeah. Homeostasis refers to a system's ability to regulate its internal environment and maintain a constant condition of properties like temperature or pH.
Worst bedtime story ever.
My point is, I don't like when things change. So, regardless of your feelings, I would like you to continue dating Leonard. And also, while we're on the subject, you recently changed your shampoo. I'm not comfortable with the new scent. Will you please stop this madness and go back to Green Apple?
I'm a fan of Big Bang Theory, which is why I managed to find that little clip. But he does explain what homeostasis is. Now, for us, it's slightly different in the fact that we need to know the actual definition that obviously AQA require us to know. So learn this definition in your books, box it, color it, highlight it, do whatever you need to do it. But just make sure you highlight the fact that this is a definition that you need to know. Not verbatim as such, so you don't need to know word for word, but as long as you've got the general gist and the understanding of it. So what is homeostasis? It is the regulation of the conditions inside your body and cells to maintain a stable environment in response to changes in both the internal and external conditions. Sounds technical, sounds complicated. However, it is quite simply, if it is cold outside, your body will do something. If it is warm outside, your body will equally do something. Now, you'll probably be able to describe what it would be able to do. That is basically what homeostasis is. If you eat sugar, or if you eat lots of food, your body will do something. It will react in a certain way to those conditions. If you do not eat enough, then your body will also react to those conditions. What homeostasis does is to make sure that the internal environment, i.e. your body, functions the way it should, regardless of the internal and external conditions it needs to respond to. Okay, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it doesn't work. A classic example is diabetes. That's where the body doesn't regulate the conditions inside the body, and that's where we need to help the body regulate itself. Maybe by taking insulin injections, or maybe by controlling blood sugar. We will come to that. That's a separate lesson when we talk about glucose control. So that's our definition of homeostasis. Like I said before, there's various ways homeostasis works, and it needs to keep a constant internal environment. And there are 4 main conditions that we need to control. So in order for our tissues and cells to function properly, the internal conditions of the body must be kept constant. What are the 4 main conditions we need to control? Now, I've given you some images. I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to jot down some answers. There we go. 30-second timer. All I want you to do is, what do you think those images represent in terms of the body controlling? Okay, so 30 seconds up. Let's see what we've got in terms of those. So what have we got as our 4 answers? We should have water as our first one. Iron levels or salt. You may have put salt because you saw Na+, but it was really meant to show ion. So ion levels, and that could be anything. So salt, potassium, calcium, so forth. Body temperature, that's another thing that we do control, and glucose. Now, each of those systems is controlled by the body. So, sorry, each of those variables are controlled by the body. We need to keep them all the same, and our body reacts in a certain way depending if we've got low or high levels of water, low or high levels of ions, if our body temperature increases or decreases, or whether glucose increases and decreases. So I'll give you 30 seconds to jot those 4 down. So there are 4 main constants. Okay, so hopefully you managed to get those down. And what we then need to do is we just need to go through exactly what each of the organs do. So for example, there are certain organs that will regulate certain aspects of those constants. So what we've got is we've got kidneys, and they regulate water and mineral ion concentration. So that's what your kidneys do. And those of you on triple will learn more about that in detail. Skin regulates body temperature, and the liver and the pancreas regulate blood glucose levels. Okay, so that's what each one of those do. And the upcoming lessons will go through each one of those aspects. So we will learn about each one of those aspects in more detail. So we'll learn about how the kidneys regulate water. We will also have a lesson on regulation of body temperature, and we'll have a lesson on liver and pancreas. I'll give you 30 seconds to jot that down. Okay. Right, so just to make sure that we're on the right track, I've got an exam question for you. Now, hopefully you're able to see that. If you're not, I'll read through it. So let's just make sure that we're on the right lines. So this is an exam question, 7 marks, just on the bit that we've just done so far. So just jot down the answers as you can see them. So question 1, the body controls internal conditions. Use the words from the box to complete the sentences about water loss from the body. So you've got kidneys, liver, lungs, and skin. Then you're given 3 questions. Water is lost in sweat via the something, water is lost in urine via the something, and water is lost in the breath via the something. Now for those 3 answers, I'll give you 1 minute. Shouldn't need any more time than that to answer those. And we'll go through this together step by step. So the first one is water is lost in the sweat via the something. Water is lost in urine via the something. And water is lost in the breath via the something. Okay, so that's the first part of the question. We'll go through the answers later. Part B, students investigated body temperature in the class. The bar chart shows the results, so you can see those results there. One student used the bar chart to calculate the mean body temperature of the class. The student calculated the mean body temperature as 37.0 degrees Celsius. How did the student use the bar chart to calculate the mean? Okay, so how did the student use the bar chart to calculate the mean? Part 2, how many students had a body temperature higher than the mean? So how many students had a body temperature higher than the mean? And body temperature must be kept within a narrow range. Why? Why does body temperature need to be kept in a narrow range? So you've got 2, 1, and 1. I'd give you 2 minutes on those questions. Okay, so hopefully you've managed to get your answers. Let's have a look through them. So what we should have got, question 1 is skin is where we sweat from. Kidneys is where urine is being filtered and so forth. Your breath comes from your lungs. How do you work out the mean? You add all of the numbers up. So you multiply the temperature by the number of students. So say, for example, if you look back at that graph, there were 5 students who had 36.8, 3 students who had 36.9. So basically you kind of add all those up by timesing the number of students and then divide by the number of students, which was 24. You should hopefully have got the number 10 for the number of students who have got above 37. So that was the 7 at 37.1 and then the 3 at 37.2. That would equal 10. And the reason why you need to keep the body temperature the same is to make sure that all the enzymes works and also make sure all the body reactions, all your cell reactions are working well. Okay, so if they're working well, then that'll be fine. Hopefully you managed to at least get half marks. You managed to get half marks and you're on the right track. And just make sure the mistake that I imagine many of you have made, particularly on the mean one, is that you just thought that each one was one student and that was the temperature. And then you just counted those. You can't do that. It tells you the number of students on the y-axis. So if you look back on that graph, it's the y-axis. It tells you the number of students. Okay. Subtitle, automatic control systems. There are 2 control systems we have in our body. One is the nervous, which we've already done, and one is a hormonal control system. So basically, to control everything that we've spoken about so far, that's the water levels, the ion levels, the sweating levels, and the body temperature levels, we have 2 ways of controlling it. Either we can control it through the nervous system, or we can control it through the hormonal system. Now, all automatic control systems are made up of 3 main components. Okay, and we've gone through this before. You have got the receptors that detect any change. You then got a coordination center that basically coordinates the change. That's generally what the once the message comes from the brain, that's kind of what the organ does. And then you got the effector, okay, and that's what happens. So that could be like a muscle moving or a gland releasing something. So you always have a receptor, that's generally the sense organs in some sort of way, the coordination centers, which is the CNS, and then the effector, which could be your gland and your muscle. So there are 2 types, nervous and hormonal. I'm just going to pause for a second and give you a minute to think about what are hormones and can you think of any examples? Okay, so what are hormones? Can you think of any examples? And if you can think of any examples, what do they do? You might know what they can do. So I'll give you a minute to think about that. Okay, so what are hormones and can you think of any examples? Rather than me go through some of those, what we should get is this. So hormones, and you can write, you do need to write these down, but I'll read through them and then you can write them down. So hormones are chemical molecules released directly into the blood to regulate bodily processes. Okay, so basically they're chemicals, they get released into the blood and they regulate what happens. They're carried in the blood plasma to other parts of the body, but only affect particular cells in particular organs. They don't cause effect on all. Hormones control things in organs and cells that need constant adjustment. So what I would like you to do is get down the blue definition. That blue definition is a classic exam question. It's generally worth 3 marks. All the time it's worth 3 marks. So if you remember that, then whenever you get a question on describe or explain how a hormone works, so describe a hormone and or explain how a hormone works, this is what you would need to say. And it's generally worth between 2 and 3 marks. So I'll read it out and then I'll give you 30 seconds to get it down. Hormones are chemical messengers, that's 1 mark. Released by glands, 2 marks, which travel in the blood to activate target cells, and that would be your 3rd mark. So that's what you would get your marks for. I'll give you 30 seconds to get that definition of hormones down. That's the blue box. Okay, so that's your definition of hormones. Let's talk a bit more about them. So, the next thing that we can talk about is the endocrine system, and that's basically a different word for the hormonal system in this sense. Okay, so you can put a subtitle of endocrine system if you wish. Now, what is it? Hormones are produced in and secreted by various glands called endocrine glands. So where hormones come from, they are called endocrine glands. The endocrine system uses hormones to react to changes in the environment or changes inside the body. So that's all the endocrine system is. It is something that reacts to changes in the environment or changes in the body, and hormones are released from the glands. Now we're going to go through each of those glands. Pause the video if you wish to get that down, but it's not necessarily important to understand that, apart from the fact that you just need to know what an endocrine system is, and that is where hormones are released and react to the changes in environment. So where are endocrine glands? And we do need to be able to A, know these 6 glands, and B, be able to label them. So that's our job in terms of this. So endocrine glands, we need to be able to name them, and then we need to be able to label them. Now, what you've noticed on the diagram, there are more glands than we have stated. Those are just out of interest. So, you know, you've got some extra glands there, the hypothalamus, the pineal gland, the parathyroid gland, the islets of Langerhans, as it's called. You don't need to know those for GCSE. However, they're quite useful just to have on that diagram. However, these 6 glands you do need to know. Okay, so you've got ovaries, which what I'll do is just so you have an idea of where they are, is there. You've got testes, which, now just be clear about this, just to make sure that there's no one making any mistakes. Ovaries female, testes male. They're the only 2 glands that are related to someone's sex. Everyone else has all the others. Okay, so testes is male and ovaries is female. Then what we've got is the pituitary gland, which is also called the master gland. So that's a really important gland we'll come to, and that's just below your brain. So I'm going to highlight that in red because that is also called your master gland. You've then got your pancreas, just there in the middle, just in between the 2 kidneys. You've got your thyroid, which is kind of in your neck. And then you've got 2 glands, which are your adrenal glands on top of your kidneys. Okay, so they are our 6 glands. So ovaries, testes, pituitary gland, pancreas, thyroid, and adrenal glands. If you've not managed to get those down, I'll give you 30 seconds to get those down. Okay, so hopefully you managed to get those down. What we now need to do is we need to think about matching up the gland with its function. So you've got all 6 glands down, but each one of them does something different. Now, the likelihood is you know something about these, hopefully. You might have been taught it, or you might have just read about it, or you just simply just know it. Okay? You may have got it from information in the news or something like that. So what I want us to do is we've got those 6 glands: ovaries, pituitary, pancreas, thyroid, testes, and adrenal. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to read through what they do and see if you can match them up without knowing anything. Okay, and then we'll go through and see what our answers are and see if we've matched them up correctly. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes, have a read through and see if you can match them up. I'll try and put the timer somewhere where it's not blocking your view. There we go. Some of them you might not know, but by working out the ones you do know, you might be able to have a good guess at them. Okay, so let's have a go and see if we can match them up. So the first one, this produces many hormones that regulate bodily conditions. It is sometimes called the master gland. Now I kind of gave that away in the last one, because these hormones act on other glands, directing them to release hormones that bring about change. Now that one is your pituitary. So that one links with that one. Okay, I'll give you time to get these down. If you haven't, you can get them down as I'm talking. That's absolutely fine. So pituitary gland is that one. The next one, these produce testosterone, which controls puberty, sperm production in males. That is the testes, that one. I'm going to leave that one because that one's probably one that you've not heard of. You may have, but I'm going to take it that most haven't, so we'll come back to that. Produce estrogen, which is involved in the menstrual cycle. Most will know that as well, and that is the female one, which is the ovaries. These produce adrenaline. Adrenaline is something that everyone seems to have heard of, mainly because of, probably because it's used to prepare the body for fight or flight. Where does adrenaline come from? Well, the adrenal glands. Okay. Then the last one, this produces insulin, which is used to regulate blood glucose. That should be the pancreas. And then that leaves only one, which is the thyroid. So that leaves the thyroid gland, and it has to be that one. This produces thyroxine, which is involved in regulating things like the rate of metabolism, heart rate, and temperature. So that's what the thyroid does. I'll give you 30 seconds, and you may need to pause the video if you need more time, but that's fine. I'll give you 30 seconds to try and get as many of those down as you can, or correct them if you didn't manage to get them right. Okay, pause the video if you manage not to get all of those down, but we do need to know a little bit about each one. There are your answers. So again, pause the video if my answers weren't clear in terms of what those were. So what we need to be aware of is what's the difference between the hormones and the nervous response? Both do something, but they react very differently. So hormones are carried in the blood. They tend to travel around the body relatively slowly. However, they also tend to have relatively long-lasting effects. So they travel around the blood. It takes a while. It's not very quick. However, it's longer lasting. Hormones and nerves do similar jobs in the body, but with a few differences. So that's what hormones do. That's a hormonal response. We've already had the nervous lesson, so we should have a bit of an idea of what the differences are between hormones and nerves. So what I want us to do, it says draw the following table in your books. If you've got a sheet of paper, it's absolutely fine, or a whiteboard and so forth. Now, this is fairly straightforward. We've got nerves, we've got hormones. You've got the speed, is it quick or slow? The duration, is it long or short? The impact, is it all over or is it specific? Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 2 minutes because you may need to draw the table. Don't worry if you don't draw the table, you can put them as nerves and hormones as subtitles. So I'll give you 2 minutes to jot down what you think the speed, the duration, and the impact of nerves and hormones are. Okay, 2 minute time is up. Okay, so let's have a look and see. Those were the labels, so fast, slow, acts for a long time, acts for a short time, acts in a more general way, or acts in a very precise area. So let's see what we should have got. So nerves are fast, they're fast action. Hormones are slower action. You know, they tend to take their time. That's because they have to travel through the blood, whilst the nerves, they travel through neurons, and obviously it's electrical impulses, and electricity travels very, very quick. Okay. Nerves act for a short time. Normally they're a response to something immediate. Like for example, someone throwing a snowball at you, you are going to move out the way very quickly. You cannot wait for that snowball because the snowball's moving at a quick. And the nerves allow you to respond to very quick stimuluses. Hormones act for a long time. Okay, so they're longer lasting. So it could be like growth hormones, for example, or the female menstrual cycle hormones, or even the male sex hormones. Nerves acts on a very precise area. So it might be that it causes your fingers to move. It might be that it causes your eyes to blink. But whatever it is, it's very, very precise. Hormones act in a more general way. It may affect various aspects of your body, even though it comes from one target organ. So there's one organ that may produce that hormone. It has an effect probably around the body to various aspects. Okay, so hopefully you managed to get that table right. If you haven't, then just pause the video and get those down. But that's the explanation in terms of the difference between nerves and hormones. Now, just to make sure, coming to the end of the lesson, just to make sure that we're good in terms of knowing what we've done. So what we were meant to do today is explain what homeostasis is and why it is important. That was our challenge. So we wrote the definition and we wrote what it controls. And then our aspire was to compare the nervous system to the endocrine system. The following lessons are all on the endocrine system now. So we're going to go through various aspects of the endocrine system. So you would have heard, like keywords state below, you would have heard homeostasis. We've gone through endocrine, what a gland is, where that's release hormones, obviously, what a hormone is, nervous, pituitary, adrenal, thyroid, ovaries, and testes being the hormones. You have got 5 questions. I'm going to give you 1 minute. I'll give you 2 minutes actually. And within those 2 minutes, I'll read those questions out, drop them down 1 to 5, and we'll go through them just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So question 1, how are hormones carried around the body? Okay. You can either write it as a sentence, your answer, or you could just write the question with the answer. It's up to you. Try not just to write the answer because then you don't know what that answer relates to. Okay, so how are hormones carried around the body? Question 2, fairly straightforward. True or false? Hormones affect all organs. Is that true or is that false? Question 3, what are hormones, or where are hormones secreted from, it should say. So where are hormones secreted from? Or what? Secrete is a technical word for basically release. So something that secretes basically releases it. So where are they released from or secreted from? Question 4. This might be a bit difficult, but see if you can remember. Name a hormone secreted from the ovaries. Okay, so name a hormone secreted from the ovaries. My only clue is it also begins with an O. Okay, there are others, but the one that you generally know is the one beginning with O. And you would also find it in the combined pill as well, although not as common anymore. And question 5, which produces a faster response, the nervous system or the hormonal system? Okay, so hopefully you've got 5 answers. Let's go through those. So how are hormones carried around the body? Hopefully you put by the blood plasma. Carried in the blood is okay. You know, generally you'd be given the more technical answer would be blood plasma. And it's a question that comes up quite a lot because people get confused with what the blood carries, okay, and what are the components of the blood, which is what the blood is made out of. Those are 2 different things. True or false, hormones affect all organs. That is false, because they only affect particular organs called target organs. Okay. Question 3, where are hormones secreted from? They are secreted from the glands, of which we know, or which we should know, 6. Pituitary in your brain, thyroid in your throat, adrenal on top of your kidneys, pancreas in the middle of your body essentially, or just in between your kidneys, ovaries only found in a female, and testes, that's generally found in the abdomen area, and testes found in scrotum, and they are just male. Okay, so they are the glands. Number 4, name a hormone secreted from the ovaries. The one hopefully you generally come up with is estrogen or oestrogen, if you always forget how to spell it. And question 5, which produces a faster response? Is it nervous or hormones? It is, in this case, nerves, because electrical impulses will travel faster than chemicals going around the body in the blood. Okay, so they're your answers for those 5. Hopefully you managed to get 5 out of 5. If you didn't manage to get 5 out of 5, just make sure that you got the answers down to which you have got the questions wrong. Right, that is the end of lesson 4 on homeostasis, which is the topic homeostasis response B5. We will move to lesson 5 next. Thank you for joining me today, and I will see you or hear from you soon, or you'll hear from me soon. Goodbye.